Ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the Irish diaspora, thank you all for joining us here today for the launch of the Global Irish Civic Forum 2023. My name is Aidan Cronin. I'm the Director of the Irish Abroad Unit, and you will shortly hear from Minister of State for Overseas Development and Diaspora, Mr. Colm Brophy, TD. After the Minister's address, he'll be happy to take some questions from you. There's a Slido link in the chat facility on your screens, so please use that to submit your questions, and please also identify yourself and your organisation if and when you submit a question. We probably won't get around to taking all the questions, but we'll take a cross-section to represent the views and the questions being asked. So now it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Minister of State for Overseas Aid and Diaspora, Mr. Colm Brophy, TD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aidan. Now, just I suppose to start by thanking you all for taking the time to join us here today. I know there are representatives of the Irish diaspora community organisations, representatives of Irish-based partner organisations, the diaspora and of Irish media. And today is a virtual gathering of Irish diaspora representatives. But as life returns to normal, it's time for us to gather in person. So I'm delighted, therefore, to announce that the next Global Irish Civic Forum will take place in Dublin in April 2023. Further details on the exact details of it will be announced shortly. It'll be the third such forum, building on the great work done on the two previous iterations in 2015 and 2017. And these gatherings are first and foremost about connections. It's an opportunity for government to connect in person with its diaspora partners. It's an opportunity for Irish community organisations from all over the world to connect with each other. We are a community, and at the heart of any community must be that sense of connection and togetherness. It's also an opportunity, though, for government to inform and consult with you, Irish community leaders from all over the world, on the key policy developments and topical issues. It's been 6 years since the second Civic Forum in 2017. We obviously would have met earlier, but for the intervention of COVID. The intervening 5 years have certainly been, to put it mildly, interesting, and we therefore have much to discuss. The agenda has yet to be finalised, but amongst the issues that are likely to feature are implementing the government's diaspora strategy, that's 2020 to 2025, the extension of voting rights, the immigrant support programme, enhanced supports for returning immigrants, youth engagement, the legacy of COVID, and diaspora networks in the USA and Great Britain. The question of participation of overseas citizens in our democracy, I believe, will be a particularly important agenda item. The current programme for government contains a commitment to hold a referendum on extending the franchise in presidential elections to citizens resident outside the state. The diaspora strategy restates that commitment. Progress has been made, but there's an awful lot more work to do. I want 2023 to be a year when we really stimulate and really advance public debate on a referendum to extend voting rights to our diaspora. This forum will be an important point on our journey as we build a pathway towards this referendum. And you're all familiar with the background, I think, but it'd be helpful at this juncture just to recall briefly the progress that we've made so far. So extending the franchise in presidential elections to Irish citizens resident outside the state was recommended in the 5th report on the Convention of the Constitution, and that was in 2013. That was accepted by government in March 2017, and the 2017 Global Irish Civic Forum recommended the right to vote should be extended to all citizens, and this was endorsed by the then government. In September 2019, the bill was initiated in Dáil Éireann by the Minister for Foreign Affairs. That bill lapsed with the dissolution of the 32nd Dáil on the 14th of January, and in July 2020, the commitment was given in the new programme for government, and the bill was reintroduced to the order paper for the 33rd Dáil. The bill is currently before Dáil Éireann at second stage. The date for the holding of the referendum will be decided once that legislation has been enacted. So there has been a lot of work done, but there is still an awful lot we need to do before a date can be set with confidence that we will achieve a positive outcome. I firmly believe that it is difficult to pass referendums without full engagement with the public on the issues that are the subject of that referendum. And I have been involved in a number of referendum campaigns going all the way back to the 1980s in Ireland. If I've learned anything from those experiences, is that preparation must be thorough. The groundwork must be laid. The Irish electorate take its responsibilities at the ballot box very seriously. If we take them for granted, it'll be at our peril. And I know that you don't want that, and I don't want that. The Civic Forum, this Assembly of Diaspora Representatives, is an ideal forum for us to discuss this issue. I want to hear from the diaspora about what we need to do to bring this referendum home. I want us to emerge from the forum with a very clear shared sense of what needs to be done to prepare the ground for the referendum. We've come a long way. We do not want to fall at the final hurdle for a lack of preparation. As in previous years, the forum will take place in Dublin over 2 days with both plenary and breakout sessions, so there will be ample time to get through what will be, no doubt, a very full agenda. I'm speaking to you today from Ivy House, the headquarters of the Department of Foreign Affairs, where I have the honour to serve as Minister of State for Overseas Development and Diaspora. I was appointed to this position in July 2020, and the intervening period has been busy, interesting and rewarding time on both sides of my brief. On the diaspora side, I've really enjoyed interacting with Irish communities all over the world. Indeed, just last month, I had an opportunity in the UK to visit both London and Liverpool, and went in the US to visit Dallas and Chicago. From the Irish Centre in Liverpool to the Irish American Heritage Centre in Chicago, to name just two, I've got a real sense not just of the organisations, but also of the communities they serve. I also attended the Association of Irish and Celtic Festivals annual conference in Dallas, a great opportunity to connect in one place with so many people from so many organisations all across the United States. And there really is great value in attending such gatherings. I would hope to do so again in other parts of the world during the rest of my term in office. I'm very conscious of the great responsibility with which I have been entrusted to nurture Ireland's relationship with its diaspora. It's a relationship and a connection which we hold dear. And so we should, with a history of emigration that goes to the very heart of what we are as Irish people. It's been estimated that since the 1800s, some 10 million people have emigrated from the island of Ireland. In that great movement of people, there has been much sorrow and separation. There also, however, has been the opportunity for new beginnings. And the legacy of those new beginnings is today's thriving global Irish community. It's a community which made its mark all over the world and continues to do so till today. In business, in culture, in politics, academia, sports, all across all areas of human endeavour, the Irish diaspora continues to shine. It does so while retaining a great fondness for and connection to Ireland. It's a relationship and a connection that is not static. It evolves and changes as circumstances dictate, and it's all the healthier, I believe, a relationship for that. I have seen the evolution myself since being appointed as Minister for the Diaspora in July 2020. The COVID experience was hard for all of us, particularly for those separated from family and friends. In terms of the relationship with our diaspora, however, there were some positive aspects to it. I think it marked another point of evolution of the relationship, with the government reacting to the needs of Irish communities overseas. And as the scale of the impact of the pandemic on our diaspora communities became clear, the government established a dedicated COVID-19 response fund for Irish communities abroad. We were in a position to react to the new circumstances by virtue, though, of the existing relationships and partnerships which we had built over such a period of time. It demonstrated to me that real value of that successive engagement with all the community organisations, with all the networks that has actually been taking place since 2004. The fund responded to cases of hardship, particularly in Britain, due to the ageing Irish community. It also responded to the needs in the United States, where many people remain undocumented and were therefore unable to access the support services for COVID-19. We put a total of 1.35 million to nearly 100 projects with the focus on the main immigration centres. None of this would have been possible without your support. We owe you all a great debt of thanks. But the COVID experience does not define us, however. Our diaspora work continued even in the shadow of COVID. In November 2020, we launched Global Ireland, which is Ireland's diaspora strategy from 2020 to 2025. It was another watershed in the evolution of the relationship, the connection between Ireland and its diaspora. That strategy was born out of the need to sustain and renew the meaningful connection with our diaspora. It frames the work we are doing to enhance our relationship with the diaspora and commits us to action in a number of key areas. We've made good progress. We are assisting Irish entrepreneurs returning home through our Back Safe for Business programme. We've established the St. Bridget's Day as a celebration of talent and the creativity of Irish women. We are deepening our connection with people from whom the Irish heritage is a more distant connection. And we've increased our outreach to traditionally underrepresented groups. But we continue to support Irish cultural associations and festivals on a worldwide basis. And we continue to work with and indeed enhance and deepen the relationship with the GAA to promote Gaelic Games. The strategy acknowledges the importance of the Emigrant Support Programme, which remains at the heart of our work with the diaspora communities and which prioritises initiatives which build on the pillars of the strategy. The strategy also recognises the need to heal the relationship with our immigrants who left Ireland in crisis as a result of discrimination or as victims of institutional abuse. As Minister for the Diaspora, I've been determined to build on and give practical effect to that recognition. I work closely with my colleagues across government to ensure the needs of those survivors living outside of Ireland are addressed. Their needs must be reflected in a flexible implementation of the Government Action Plan for Survivors and former residents of mother and baby and county home institutions. Through our embassies and consulates, we will work to continue closely with the Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth and communicate back to those survivors and their representatives living abroad. It's been a particular priority for me to ensure that those living outside of Ireland had a dedicated point of contact. I was therefore particularly pleased that last week the government approved the appointment of a special advocate for survivors. The special advocate's role will be to represent the collective interests of those who suffered institutional abuse. This will ensure that their views will inform the delivery of the measures as set out in the government's action plan. A key part of the advocate's engagement will be working with our embassies and consulates abroad to ensure that those needs are actually met and are reflected. In addition, the Special Advocate will be supported by an advisory council which will have specific representation from survivors living outside of Ireland. This is a particularly difficult time for survivors and for many of you who work with the survivor community abroad. So I would again like to take the opportunity to thank you for your dedicated support that you provide. I have made additional funding available from the Immigrant Support Programme for organisations working with our overseas survivors. This will include additional funding for outreach workers to ensure survivors are supported at this time. In other areas of the diaspora strategy, the COVID experience has inevitably slowed our progress. We still have work to do over the remaining 3 years of the strategy in areas such as, say, the enhanced digital connections, addressing barriers to returning to Ireland, working with local authorities on their diaspora policies, and streamlining the ESP application and reporting procedures, which a number of people have raised with me on a number of occasions. This civic forum, I want to be a platform for discussion and debate. It'll also be a springboard for implementing the remainder of the government's diaspora strategy. But most of all, however, it'll be about connection, it'll be about conversation, and it'll be about creative thinking. So with that in mind, I really do look forward to seeing you all in Dublin next spring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. I'm sure that has whetted all of our appetites for our gathering in Dublin next April. Now we'll have time for a few questions. I have two so far, so please, I would encourage you to send in some on voting rights or anything else that you've heard the Minister speak about. First question from the US, from Hilary Byrne, originally from Roscommon, on behalf of votingrights.ie. Minister, having been considered at and recommended by a number of different fora, a referendum expanding voting rights to Irish citizens resident outside the state has now been on the agenda of several governments. What is this government's timeline for such a referendum, and what would cause the current government to delay or not move forward with this initiative?
Well, thank you very much. As I indicated in my remarks, first of all, the government is absolutely committed to the referendum. We put it into the programme for government, and we immediately reinitiated the legislation necessary to make sure it could progress. So unfortunately for us, COVID intervened. COVID has had a huge impact on a whole host of areas, but one of them was clearly its impact on the ability to hold a national referendum. For me, the key thing about this is that, as I said quite clearly, you can never presume, you can never take for granted, you can never in any way underestimate how a referendum can go very quickly out of control and can become an issue about a whole host of issues that are not maybe central to what the question being asked is. And the way you prevent that, and the way you make sure that that doesn't happen, is you put the groundwork in, you put the hard work, the spade work in terms of making sure that there's a clear path, there's a clear identity, there's a clear communication strategy as to what wants to be achieved. And as someone who's very passionate about achieving this, I want to see that work coming out of the Civic Forum, and I then want to see us progressing to a referendum. So I'll never ever say there can't be delays. No one at the start of 2019 predicted what COVID was going to do. In the absence of something like that, I'm hoping that we will be looking at maybe 2024, that type of area, but I don't want to be 100% definitive, because I think I don't want to prejudge the outcome of the Civic Forum. I want to listen, I want to engage, and I want to make sure that we come out of the forum with the right path, the right timeline, to ensure that when this referendum is put, that it is passed.
Thank you, Minister. We have a second question. It's anonymous. There was a name attached to it, but it's disappeared, so I won't give the name. Minister, can we have some reassurance the consultation, conversation and pending Global Irish Summit will enhance collective campaigning on positive outcome of the referendum?
Absolutely, that's what I want out of it. I mean, I think that realistically, the most important thing to do is to come together, is to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and is to make sure we take that out then into a campaigning mode, which will involve work for everybody. The one thing which everybody, I have no doubt, is already aware of is governments don't campaign on a referendum. They're precluded by law. So it becomes a matter for organisations, for political parties, for civil society, for everybody who's on either side of a viewpoint to come together and advocate for the case. And I believe that some of the greatest and strongest voices that we can have in conjunction with people like myself will be the voice of our diaspora community, will be the voice of Irish citizens all over the world, and will be that key message that what we are doing is we are being inclusive, we are reaching out. And when you actually think particularly of our last few presidents and the work which they have done, the tireless work which they have done in terms of an engagement to be the president of all Irish people, the diaspora, the people living here on the island, and making sure that they had that inclusive reach themselves, I think there's a real strong message that we can talk about how we strengthen and enhance the presidency, particularly in that area, by strengthening and enhancing the franchise to Irish citizens by giving them the opportunity to participate in the vote, no matter where they're living.
Thanks, Minister. We have another question. It's time from David Hennessy, the Irish World newspaper. Minister, why do you personally support votes for the Irish abroad, and why is the conversation not extended to general elections?
Well, the first thing is, in terms of the general, let's take the extension for a second here. I'm a great believer in working through a process. And I said in my opening remarks, there was a process gone through which took us through a civic forum, which took us through a recommendation, which took us through an acceptance of government of that. And that process was to extend it for presidential. One key thing about the presidential is this is the only post in Ireland, the only national post in Ireland elected by the people of Ireland directly. So it's a very clear and easy way for people to have a direct say. And the reason I'm passionate on it is I believe, as I said, actually really in part of my earlier just answer that I gave, is that it's a real, I believe, strengthening and enhancing for the presidency to have that greater involvement in the election of a president. And I think it's a really positive engagement effectively by having a situation where people can participate in this very unique election process. The only one, as I say, in the state where everybody gets an opportunity to directly elect somebody. And I believe, as someone who is a strong believer in democracy, that you should at every opportunity look how you can practically enhance the democratic process. And I think this extension to the presidential is a real practical enhancement. But I would stress, it's not. We've seen in some surveys done or opinion polls or whatever, it's not necessarily a overwhelmingly universally shared. This is an argument we'll have to win, that we will have to go out and make the case and make the point, because if you have slim or narrow leads at the start of a referendum, they can very quickly evaporate. So we need to be focused, I think, on making sure that we secure this referendum with all our efforts.
Thank you, Minister. That's the end of the questions submitted. So I think the Minister has covered a lot of ground, particularly on the voting rights issue. So if nobody has any more questions, we might call a halt to proceedings. And just to say, we look forward to seeing some, if not all of you, in Dublin next spring, when we can continue the conversation on voting rights and other issues as well. So, Gurlev Mina Mahagwif, Slán go fóill. Thank you.
Thank you. Slán.